for Freedom, presented by Warriors for Freedom Foundation. Go to our website, warriorsforfreedom.org. This program is sponsored by McRoof, Cathedral Energy, Hog Wild, and the law offices of Rod Polston and Associates. Also brought to you in part by Hudeberg Auto Group, Legree and Associates, and On the Border Mexican Grill and Cantina. I am your ombudsman for our military, and I'm also the host. My name is Scott Deathridge. Everybody calls me Scotty Dee. In the studio with me today, of course, my co-host, Lieutenant Colonel Steve Russell. Now, look at me, ladies and gentlemen. Pay attention. Warriors for Freedom is a nonprofit that provides direct support to our nation's military heroes and their families with mental health wellness through indoor and outdoor activities. And our primary fundraising partner is the Folds of Honor Foundation, providing educational scholarships to spouses and children of our nation's fallen and wounded. Now, you can join the Warrior Nation, and it's real easy. Just go to warriorsforfreedom.org, or you can like us on Facebook to learn more. If you'd like to send me an email, it's Scotty with a Y, D-E-E, at warriorsforfreedom.org. Our producer and artillery officer, we call him Howitzer Jack. He's the guy that takes your calls. I'll put you on the air, and the number to call to be on today's program, 478-1520, or you can call us toll-free at 866-530-5662. This first segment is brought to you by McRoof. For over 30 years, Scott McCullum has been serving home and commercial business owners, and he's been recognized for superior service and craftsmanship. Now, McRoof, he's the master sergeant when it comes to roofing, and I got to tell you, they don't get any better than this guy. Say what you mean, do what you say. People don't have to agree with you, but they have to be able to count on you. McRoof, where everyday replacement is a replacement done right. McRoof. Call them 405-600-5587 or go to mcroof.us.com. All right, ladies and gentlemen, big show today, Colonel.
Yeah.
I mean, should we drop the bombshell now or should we hold off?
Well, no, I think we do now, so we can alert our listening audience to maybe get some other people to invite listeners in. We have very special guests today to talk some of the most critical issues that we've been discussing on this show for some time. What are we talking about? Well, we're talking about the Bergdahl case, VA, Benghazi, any number of things.
IRS.
We're fortunate today in studio, mind you, to have Congressman Darrell Issa and Congressman James Lankford both in the studio to talk about some of these issues.
I don't know how you arranged that, Colonel, but I got to tell you, you've got some pull.
Well, it's not me. It's just wonderful that they're here. And so they will be here shortly, and please tune in and invite the listening audience. We also had a very special anniversary, Scotty, that came up on Friday, June 6th. 70th anniversary of D-Day, a very special day. I've been very privileged to have gone to many of the commemorations in France in 1993, 94, 99, 04. Very nice to have them to see those commemorations and meet a lot of the old veterans.
Absolutely, no question about it. Wow, what a great day it was yesterday. Of course, yesterday, Warriors for Freedom, I took a group of veterans down to the Texas Motor Speedway for a race day weekend of a lifetime. And, of course, we've partnered up with a great corporate sponsor, Mr. Snyder Heron. He owns one of the condos on the racetrack. And the condos, of course, are right there in Turn 2. An amazing experience. One of them, of course, is an amputee. And one, of course, has 4 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star.
Yeah, amazing.
These 3 ladies and gentlemen got to experience something that most people will not get to experience in their lifetime, and it was just incredible.
One of the most memorable moments for me was talking to Major General Al Smith, who was an operations officer with the 16th Infantry that morning on Omaha Beach. He landed in a landing craft, CVP. His craft was swept with machine gun fire. We determined that at Weapons Nest 62, you had a bunker there. A German soldier named Franz Guckel was firing the machine gun, and I had the privilege to talk to both of these gentlemen that were facing each other on the morning on Omaha Beach.
No kidding.
Incredible to just be there where they were recounting their memories of that morning.
Outstanding. Well, of course, in the studio with us today, Congressman Darrell Issa, Congressman James Lankford. Now, of course, Congressman Issa is California's 49th Congressional District that he represents. A little thing that may not know about Congressman Issa, he was Army ROTC, and he was a captain in 1980. So he has a great love for the military as well. And, of course, James Lankford, he's been our representative since 2011. He serves on the Budget Committee, Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, and the Subcommittee on Energy Policy, Healthcare, and Entitlements Chairman. And he's also a Republican Party Committee Chair. Great to have you gentlemen with us today. It's a real privilege. What do you got going on in Oklahoma City, Congressman Issa?
Well, actually, I'm here for Congressman Lankford. He's been one of my key lieutenants. He's run a subcommittee that's held this president more accountable than anyone else could have imagined. Hasn't changed the fact that the president's still in office, but he's brushed back an awful lot of bad decisions that they tried to make, including some of the EPA, if you will, unofficial decisions. And his work on supporting and defending the 60-year-old practice of fracking has been crucial. So after someone's been a subcommittee chairman at his tender seniority level, a member of the Republican leadership in the House, and then he decides to leave us and go to that other body, your choice is to get angry because you're losing a good man, or make sure he gets there because you'll have a great partner. So I'm here because James is going to be a great partner in the U.S. Senate.
Absolutely. And, of course, Congressman Lankford, it's a privilege to have you in here. Of course, I've been to several highway dedications, as a matter of fact, where you would be tied up in a committee, but your lovely wife was able to be there and represent you as well. Of course, the Brett Eisenhower Memorial Highway that was dedicated not too long ago. She was there, very gracious to the families. And we can't thank you enough for how you support our nation's military heroes and their families.
No, glad to be able to do it. I just actually came from a meeting with the 137th this morning, and those are folks that they've lost their weekend. Lots of folks are listening and hanging out and relaxing and mowing their yard and getting a chance to watch some TV and listen to some great radio. And there's some folks, men and women, that are with the 137th right now that are continuing to be able to stand watch and prepare.
Absolutely. Well, I tell you what, guys, let's just jump right into it. Let's start with the VA. A lot of talk about what's been going on with the Veterans Administration and how they serve our veterans around the country. There is some legislation that's being proposed to alleviate some of those hardships. Gentlemen, why don't one of you just go ahead and tell the listening audience what the Senate's trying to do with that?
Well, I think what the Senate's trying to do is put a Band-Aid where a tourniquet is needed. But we'll take the Band-Aid for now. Getting our veterans, particularly the most needy, service quickly outside the system is a stopgap measure. When you consider that many of the people that lost their lives were suffering from PTSD, they're the folks that need the specific care that we want the VA to know how to do like no other hospital, we also have to fix it. And that's where Chairman Miller and the Veterans Committee has an obligation to fix it going forward. But for right now, whether it's James's oversight of how these failures happened and what part the administration may have had in perpetuating that false narrative that the VA was in good shape, that's part of getting to the bottom of how do you fix it. But for right now, I think all of us, especially those of us who have served, very much want to make sure that we put a Band-Aid on this quickly so that at least we won't have more dying waiting for an opportunity to be served by their Veterans Administration as they were promised.
And
Colonel Russell, yeah,
it's interesting, Congressman Issa, too. You know, I've been working this issue for the last 2 years with Concerned Veterans for America. Pete Hegseth and I, we've traveled the country extensively on this issue. And as we saw the VA Accountability Act work its way through the House, we were very excited. And then it gets to the Senate, and now we're seeing the typical throw more money at the situation, not so much on the accountability end, and then, you know, here we go. They love to stand us up for the photo ops, but when it comes to fixing the problems for our veterans, we don't see that. Congressman Lankford, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I can't even begin to say when you say that really good bill came to the House and then it went to the Senate and here we go. I can't even begin to say the number of times that word has been said.
This is why you got to be very picky about who you let go to the Senate.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let me just say that this is not a recent issue. There are some people that will step back and say this is because of Obama or this everything else. This is not just the current administration. This is stretched out over decades. There's a lot of inattention. I was on the phone earlier this morning with a veteran who was telling me he's trying to transition out of active duty. He's leaving. He's retiring. He's just trying to get his medical records because he wants to go into the next position that he wants to do as a contractor. I know it's a shock that someone's leaving the military and going to military contracting. He's trying to transition out of that, get his VA stuff set up, and there is a 6-month backlog in his particular area just to transition the paperwork from DOD to VA, just so VA can get him into a status. 6 months. Now, I can tell you that's not the longest. There are some areas that are even longer than 6 months in the wait time. So this issue about wait times in other places is not only wait to get into the VA system and get your medical records up to date. It may be wait in an emergency room. It may be wait to be able to have care. I have veterans all the time that I do constituent service issues on. If they're going for orthopedics, if it's a knee replacement or something they consider non-critical, life-threatening, it's just a delay and just pain.
Or dental.
Or dental. You may wait 3-6 months at times to be able to get a knee surgery done. Now, they try to get that down to 30 to 45 days, but there are those that are much longer than that. If you're going to get a hearing aid, you may wait a year at the VA to be able to go through the process on a hearing aid because it's not considered life-threatening and critical, and they're working through the process. Trying to hire on more people. Just had a conversation with our Oklahoma City VA this past week to walk through.
Very good VA, by the way, here in
and
Oklahoma City. We are blessed.
We are. And I'd say a lot of things that have happened around the nation, our Oklahoma City VA has checked out. They have gone through. The Inspector General has evaluated. There are no secret lists. There are no other things. But they still have weight issues.
Yes.
They're working on the hearing aid issue even here, and it's become a big deal.
So what's the answer? How do you cut through all the paperwork and get these guys taken care of? There's no magic wand, but there's got to be a plan.
There's no magic wand that gets a chance to get into something this big and this significant. You've got to take a section of it at a time. You have to be very intentional to say, let's identify the problems. Let's stop ignoring this as a real problem. How do you identify it? Some of it is veterans that are coming out of Iraq and Afghanistan. They've had a pretty heavy load, and people getting a chance to be able to rotate out, get into the VA system. They're very, very backlogged. That's an efficiency issue. They need to take people that are not doing as much and transition to that area doing the paperwork side of it.
And
so that's one part of it. The other part of it is this access to care wherever it may be. If you're a veteran that lives in Woodward and you've got to drive into the Oklahoma City VA to get care, you're passing 7 really good hospitals on the way.
That's right.
And that's not best for them or their families.
And Congressman Issa, one of the critical things I think that the veterans were really pushing for was the special executive services, executives that were not fireable in the VA. And now we see in the provision, at least as it went out of the House, that this was one of the hallmark portions of the legislation. I see that it's so far surviving in the Senate. What is your prediction on that? Will that piece remain?
We believe it will. Sadly, of course, this is a baby step. In the way it passed out of the House, all you're really saying is people who have these super jobs, and we're talking about people who can make as much as the vice president. This is $200,000 type pay. Those people can be demoted back to being GS-15s, where they'd make $140,000, or in some cases fired. Now, much of the current law anticipated that. It's just never happened. There's a reason Lois Lerner retired from the IRS. She didn't get fired from the IRS.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. So it is a symbolic move, and it's an important one, and I think it says a lot. But let's also remember, and James made it very clear, and I think that's right, the quality of care the hospitals are giving is good. The transparency and honesty about the real backlogs and problem were bad. And this is where Congressman Lankford has worked so hard to get transparency in government. If you want to know what the solution is let good people who are trying to provide great care to our veterans continue doing what they're doing, the hospital care. There's been very little complaint about the quality of care.
If they could get there,
It's access. Now, I'm going to say one thing, and this is, I'm here to campaign for James because he's my hero, but I'll make an independent one. As a veteran, every one of us who has a choice of going to the VA hospital for the next 6 months or going to a non-VA hospital, because many of us are getting to retirement age, we really have that choice. If you can choose not to go to the VA for now, do that. That's a favor to those most needy. If somebody's dealing with PTSD, if somebody's dealing with many of the things our veterans uniquely deal with, they may not have that choice. So we as veterans can help lighten the load for a short period of time. But as James has been working on since he got to Congress, holding the administration accountable to be truthful about where the problems are, to be transparent, is the only solution to know what needs to be fixed, and for us in Congress, working with the administration, to apply those fixes. But we're not going to throw money at a problem where they won't tell you the truth.
Right.
We can only provide funds where we know there's a need and it's been demonstrated.
Well, it's also true that a lot of people are unaware that for our veterans that are over the age of 65, there are health care programs out there that have no premium, and they can pay a small deductible and go anywhere if they sign up. However, of course, these insurance companies cannot approach them. They have to be approached by the veteran. This could alleviate a lot of problems with the 65 and over veterans, but nobody's made aware of it, and very few people know about it.
Well, even the same situation where veterans currently coming into a VA system, if there's a backlog and a long wait, they can actually request to try to go to private care, and the VA already has the authority to be able to say, you know what, it's going to take 45 days to be able to get you in this knee surgery. We give you the choice. Is there another place that you would like to go? Any place that takes Medicare, they already have that ongoing relationship with them now. So that currently exists now. But again, that's something a lot of veterans don't know. And unless they ask and say, gosh, if this is going to take 2 months to get this, can I go somewhere else privately and to be able to get in line and do it that way? Because I really, I can't even begin to tell you how frustrating it is for us to get a call and say, I've waited 4 months for a knee surgery when I know they could cross the street and get one at a really good hospital on Tuesday and to be able to get this done for them.
Steve?
Well, if we could switch gears a little bit before the break, obviously a lot of folks are concerned about our terrorist swap. And, initially I think all of us on the surface of it, except for maybe some of those that were very familiar with Bergdahl, initial news comes across, POW released, people had a little joy there. However, when the ugly details began to surface, it became very clear. 3 things. What was his status? We owe that to the families that were lost, the soldiers that were lost looking for Bergdahl. Second thing we see, was it a swap, a prisoner of war exchange, or was it something with a terrorist organization, the Haqqani Network, Al-Qaeda? We see some incredible crimes done with the Gang of Five. And then the third thing is, did the president violate his constitutional authority, though he claims he's protecting Americans and has it? You could also argue that he has endangered Americans worldwide and businessmen and others that are out there. What is your take on the situation currently?
Well, I think the easy part is the president did not do what he was supposed to do. He had a responsibility to report to Congress, and the idea that law only matters unless I'm concerned that it might leak. Law only matters unless there's an exigent circumstance, which is debatable, and we're looking into that. But I think on the second part, and this is one where I think in Congress we have to push to get the process to work, something that Congressman Lankford's worked very hard on. An Article 32 investigation, the Department of Defense doing their process to determine whether or not the sergeant, hopefully if he did, soon to be a private, violated the law when he deserted in combat, and if he did, he's not a prisoner of war. On the other hand, that's a Department of Defense military decision, and I want to see that process go forward.
If I could follow up on that one point, Congressman, that I know when I was a task force commander, if we had had any incident even remotely like that, or any other serious incident, as a commander, I would immediately issue an Article 32 investigation. And for our listening audience, what this is it's a commander's inquiry to get the facts so that the military can take care of what it sees as a potential violation of something. And so there is no doubt in my mind that the task force commander in the 82nd Airborne that was the commander of Bergdahl, this investigation would have been done. It would have been done within 24, 48, 72 hours in the field. It has a timeline. You may or may not be able to answer this, but has Congress been privy to those initial early investigations that may be closest to the ground truth?
Our committee has asked for a briefing specifically on the question of what investigations were done, what determinations were made, or at least what evidence was gathered. As you know, many of his colleagues are coming forward and saying, we told our commanders at the time that he deserted. Even one allegation of that sort would trigger an Article 32, and the determination could have been suspended, as you know, once the evidence was gathered, waiting for his return. But the evidence needs to be there, and a determination now is owed to the American people because he's either prisoner of war and is a considerable lifetime benefit for that, or he's a deserter and somebody who turned on his colleagues and made statements shortly after he went there, and perhaps not because he was induced to do so by torture, but in fact predisposed to do so. We're not going to make that decision in Congress. Our committee has asked for a briefing specifically from the Department of Defense as to where they stand in what you know very well had to have happened.
Well, my question is can this turn into be a PR problem? Because obviously his release has made a lot of Americans very happy. A lot of Americans don't necessarily get all the information either. The question is that if the military decides that they want a tribunal and put him in front of it, is that going to cause a PR problem?
Go ahead, James.
No, I'd say the facts when That's not our responsibility in some ways. The facts have to come out the facts. We have to treat every person equally. Every person's innocent until proven guilty. That's why you do in Article 32. You get all the facts out there and you be able to determine that. You can't make a decision and say if this is going to be a PR problem for the president or for the family or anybody else. We have to have equal justice. The wonderful lady of justice holding up the scales is blindfolded, and we can't look at what future repercussions have to be. We just have to be fair and just.
And Congressman Lankford, on that line, you've got a delicate situation where you had the Taliban. They issued a fatwa and said, we declare war against you. And then you have the United States after 9/11 that says, we're coming after you,
right.
and with congressional approval. So on one side, you could construe that this may have been between armed combatants. However, the Taliban is a declared terrorist organization. The Haqqani Network, declared terrorist organization. Al-Qaeda, declared terrorist organization. And we've suddenly found ourselves in a precarious situation. What is the view of the committee and Congress in this exchange as far as legality goes?
Oh, sure. Yeah, the biggest issue comes down to, is it legal? It was very clear in the law, in the NDAA, National Defense Authorization, that actually lists out before anyone's moved from Guantanamo, there has to be 30 days advance notification to Congress. Now, there are classified sections you can do that in the House and Senate Intelligence Committee that are behind closed doors, but there is some advice and consent that happens there. Now, it's not permission. The president just has to go to them and say, okay, here's what we're thinking about doing. Here's what we want to do. 30 days from now, we're going to actually execute this. And it gives the opportunity for some dialogue from the America's elected representatives
That's right.
to the president to come back and forth. This happened in 2011 with a deal very similar to this. And the committees of jurisdiction came back to the president and said, this is a bad idea.
Bipartisan rejection.
That's exactly right, yeah. Republicans and Democrats alike came back and said, this is a bad idea. The White House then backed off on it. Then they come back at it years later and say, we're not going to ask this time, we're just going to do it. We're going to ask forgiveness rather than permission and just press on with this. The problem is this pesky little thing called the law.
Always a problem.
This is not just an advice issue.
Happens,
It's not just a council issue. This is the law. And the president knew this was the law. The White House knew this was the law. They'd referred to it in multiple interviews. They had followed it in 2011. They were aware this was the law. Now it became the law's not convenient anymore. Well, we don't get to pick that. You and I don't get to pick that. No one driving around gets to pick that. The law is the law is the law is the law, whether you're the president or whether you're any citizen in the United States. So this becomes a very serious issue that as elected representatives, we have to be attentive to.
All right, guys, I'll tell you what. Hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break because
Great
Warriors
stuff.
for Freedom is actually a capitalist program. We have to pay some bills and do some business. In the studio with us today, Lieutenant Colonel Steve Russell, Congressman Darrell Issa, and Congressman James Lankford. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to Warriors for Freedom. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Warriors for Freedom, presented by Warriors for Freedom Foundation. This second segment is brought to you by Cathedral Energy Services, providing value-added services and solutions and jobs to veterans who want to work in the oil and gas industry. In the studio with me today, of course, my name's Scott Dethridge. Everybody calls me Scotty Dee. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Russell, Congressman Darrell Issa, and Congressman James Lankford. Gentlemen, it's a real thrill to have you guys here today because there's a lot of topics that the Colonel and I have discussed over the last year and a half that to have you here today gives the listening audience some very valuable information that they may not get any other place.
Absolutely. And to have subject matter experts here in the studio and, Congressman Issa, you've gained quite a fan base here just with the questioning in these committees from Benghazi to, and now we're seeing the Bergdahl case, Lois Lerner and all of her escapades. And it's not just questioning and politics. As we look at the depth of the questions that are asked, there are violations in law, and we are a constitutional republic. And I just personally want to say thank you for doing what you're doing, and you've got a lot of support across the country. As I travel around, people know that you are trying to do the best that you can on this.
Well, thanks, Colonel. And, holding the administration accountable, and Congressman Lankford's done a wonderful job of it, to a certain extent is about shaming the administration publicly. And I don't want to cast aspersions on anyone in politics, but we shed light. We cannot ensure that people will, in the light of their wrongdoing, necessarily run. And that's been one of the challenges is, Congressman Lankford and his subcommittee has done a great job of showing violation after violation, particularly when we look at the fracking issue and how they systematically simply tried to delay and delay, obviously the XL pipeline and so on. We've been able to shed light on it. We've been able to show violations of law, abuse of discretion. We've got an election coming up, and I'm not here to electioneer, but the American people have to respond and say, we've got to empower the right people to hold this administration accountable for the last 2 years, because at that point, it's going to be the administration doing what they want. If I can do one thing, though, on the president's responsibility to notify Congress on this exchange, the administration, including the infamous Susan Rice, have come out and implied that you couldn't trust Congress not to leak it. Let's understand, the notification is not on getting the sergeant back. The notification was on releasing 5 people from Gitmo.
Absolutely.
So the sensitivity that it might get out that we might be releasing somebody from Gitmo would not have triggered this deal. It would, in fact, have been one of those situations in which the president is afraid we would have said no and gone to the floor and stopped him. Well, guess what? That's the reason the law is there.
Exactly right.
This is not an emperor. This is not a king. Our founding fathers did not want King George. They wanted somebody who had checks and balances. The Supreme Court passed Citizens United. The president circumvented it with the Lois Lerner and their operation. The president doesn't like the idea that he has to report to Congress, so he implies that it was to get Bergdahl out in a short period of time. He implies that there would have been leaks. The truth is, he just didn't want to be said no.
Absolutely. And, it's not just in this regard, but we see it in many cases throughout the administration. When Secretary of State Clinton was in power, a lot of people don't understand after the Kenya and Tanzania bombings that the United States put into law through our Congress provisions that you have embassies or even places where we conduct diplomatic work with Americans, that they have to meet a stringent standard. And the only person that can lower those standards would be the Secretary of State or higher. And it is like there's no culpability, there's no accountability. I served with Carter Ham, General Ham, 4-star general. He was a full colonel, chief of staff of the 1st Infantry Division, and I was the secretary of the general staff. Worked very closely with the man. I find it striking.
I knew I liked you. You've got a big red one somewhere in your closet.
I do. In fact, I am a life member of the 1st Infantry Division Association and also a life member of the 26th Infantry Blue Spader Association. So if you are a big red one fan, we are brothers in arms.
Second of the 63rd.
Awesome.
Hey, but here's the best part. Lieutenant Colonel Russell is also the owner of a firearms manufacturing company. And if that ain't good stuff, I don't know what is.
Well, there isn't a Second Amendment without access to weapons.
Well, that's right. And, he's referring to Two Rivers Arms, which is a sponsor of this program. And, we build what soldiers couldn't bring home. We make the Iraqi reproductions. But on the Benghazi issue a little bit, because we've touched on several of the other issues, and I know we've discussed that a lot. And Congressman Lankford, you've done tremendous work here in digging down on these issues. We were just, making the referral to the downgrading of remote sites and how that is at the highest level, Secretary of State or higher, and there appears to be no culpability for those decisions, but it resulted in Americans losing their lives.
Right, and there is culpability into this. We'll continue to press on it. There are a couple key issues. You really break up the whole Benghazi investigation in 3 big buckets. One of them is what happened beforehand, and why were they in an insecure location that did not meet the minimum requirements required by State Department for their facilities. The second was what actually happened that night, the communication between State Department, between DOD assets and other folks that were there. And the third one is then the response to the administration. What happened? So as you break it up into those 3 buckets, let's just look at that first one. The State Department has the responsibility when we put our folks on the ground in any location to make sure they meet the minimum standards required by law. After the attack on our embassy in Kenya and Tanzania, all the rules changed for physical security and parameters. So that Accountability Review Board report that was done made changes. If any person is put in a facility that doesn't meet those minimum standards, only the Secretary of State can actually sign off on that. We have about 5 facilities worldwide that don't meet that standard. 2 of them were in Libya, Tripoli and in Benghazi. And so we had people in those facilities. The second part of this is they had security assets there. The regional security officer made sure that we had individuals there, both DOD and from the State Department, to be able to help provide security, what we would affectionately call the gun toters there, to make sure that the walls are high enough and strong enough.
That's right.
They had the adequate amount to be able to cover it. They continue to ask for those assets to be able to stay. The State Department, that was Patrick Kennedy, who's the Undersecretary of State, actually said, no, they want to normalize the security situation and took away 2/3 of their armed security. A month later, we have a dead ambassador and 3 other Americans that are lost.
Absolutely. And here's the significance for our listening audience when Congressman Lankford's referring to the regional security officer. These people are not just bureaucrats. These are people that hold a major general's worth of rank when it comes to security. They are very, very high senior officials within the State Department. They look out for the livelihood and security of all of these areas. And so when an RSO comes on the record and says, look, we have to have these forces. We have to have this for our protection. They don't do that lightly. It's not like somebody just screaming for assets, but these are life-saving recommendations. And would either one of you care to respond to what the reaction was to the RSO's request?
Great question.
I think in a nutshell, we've shown that instead of leaving those 12 in place, they removed most of them and reassigned the others. And on 9/11, none of them went downrange. As a matter of fact, the one thing that's conspicuous is not a single DOD asset headed for Benghazi not only in that 24-hour period, but in weeks. Today, you have virtually never had DOD assets put a foot on the ground in Benghazi. The FBI barely went in for a few hours, weeks after it was undone. But I want to touch on something that Congressman Lankford's been involved in and that's going to become public, is Hillary Clinton's failure is not just that they didn't do the right thing before, during, and after Benghazi, but under her watch, they approved and are building a $1 billion glass building in London as an embassy. And when I say glass, I mean this is the Crystal Cathedral type glass building. And a number of other facilities. These are very expensive. They go away from the modular safety ones that were being built under the Bush administration and General Williams. And it's an area of a combination of waste and security. These are not secure, and they're very expensive. And when you look at the continued work that Congressman Lankford and his subcommittee are doing, a lot of it is, in fact, how do we keep this from happening again? Well, the first way you do it is you build safe buildings. The second thing you do is you don't squander money so that you can get those new buildings built in a timely fashion. And that's a big part of what I'm hoping that James does when he goes to the Senate, is kick them in the butt so they're as interested in it as we are.
Well, guys, before we go to break, I get asked this question a lot by people. Of course, one of the things that we try to propose here is constitutional freedoms. You get elected. You swear upon the oath to take that you will defend the Constitution. Let's take a look at the Second Amendment. The right of the people to form a well-regulated militia and the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. What part of not be infringed do some of these people not understand?
A tremendous amount. Let's go back to, this is an issue of preference for some people. The president didn't prefer to look at the law on NDAA, and so I can just release folks from Guantanamo rather than do that. They would say, you know what, it's not my preference that actually occurs, and so they're going to try to work around it. But you're right. It could not be more blunt, could not be more clear. And as we continue to stand up over and over again and say, no, I know that's what you prefer, but that's not what the law allows. In this case, what the United States Constitution allows, you cannot do that.
It's up to the American people to make sure that when they take that oath to defend and uphold the Constitution, that if they don't do so, that there are consequences for that.
Absolutely should.
And one of the things that's striking is that this administration doesn't fear arming terrorists, but we somehow fear an armed citizenry.
Crazy stuff. All right, ladies and gentlemen, great program today. You don't want to miss this final segment. We're going to get in. We might even talk a little bit about the IRS. Heaven forbid. You're listening to Warriors for Freedom, presented by Warriors for Freedom Foundation. Go to our website, warriorsforfreedom.org. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Warriors for Freedom, presented by Warriors for Freedom Foundation. This final segment is brought to you by the law offices of Rod Polston and Associates. Of course, they do much more than resolve tax problems. They can change lives. As a matter of fact, speaking of the IRS, in the studio with me today is Lieutenant Colonel Steve Russell, Congressman James Lankford, and Congressman Darrell Issa, who knows the IRS and their issues all too well. Gentlemen, thanks for being here today. We've got about 8 minutes left. I'm going to let you guys take it and run with it. What do you say, Congressman Issa?
Basically, the American people are going to see us show that this administration targeted conservatives, and they did more than even what's already been made public. In 2010, a very large dump, millions of documents that showed the details of nonprofits and not-for-profits tax filings were sent by Lois Lerner and her people to the Department of Justice in an effort to get to prosecution of those groups. So when we look at the slow rolling of applications, which was a travesty, people say, well, okay, there's an argument. There's no argument on taking your tax filings, sending them over to the Department of Justice because you're a conservative and they'd like to have you have the full power of Attorney General Eric Holder down on you. And that's what happened. It's been substantiated, and it'll be in our next interim report.
Well, I have to tell you, Congressman, Warriors for Freedom Foundation, being a nonprofit, we went through that process of having to apply for our nonprofit status. We did that in 2011, and within 4 months, we had received our status. And we were concerned because Warriors for Freedom, helping veterans, you would think that you might be a target for that. So we did get our 501c3 approved, and at the bottom of it, it was signed by none other than Lois Lerner.
Well, it's a collector's item now.
I love this piece. It's framed.
We're one of the organizations that got approved. Imagine that.
Well, no, the issue comes back to when you actually see for all these different patriot groups and for all these different Tea Party groups that put in the application, said, we want to do this. They got a response back. And a lot of people think that they were told no. They weren't told no. They were told wait. And this is the IRS way. This is, quite frankly, the federal government way. It is much safer for them to just say, we're thinking about it, we're studying it, we're researching it, just continue to wait until they run it out. And I really believe they thought the Tea Party movement was a flash in the pan and that it would go away and these folks would just give up anyway. They haven't. It just made them more tenacious. And some of the things they were asked for in the wait is what is astounding to so many people. They asked for things like, give us all of the information about conversations you had with legislators. Now, as an American, you have a constitutional right to be able to redress your grievances to government. They basically said, when you redress your grievances, when you talk to people, tell us about the content of those conversations and when those occurred. Yeah. That is not their right to do.
Now, Fourth Amendment and the Seventh Amendment seem to protect that. Maybe they've forgotten.
Well, that's what we talked about earlier. They swear to defend the Constitution, and look what we get.
Yeah, but here's the thing that people need to remember. People get very, very frustrated about this, and they need to understand their representatives are holding people to account for this.
That's correct.
That's right.
There's this feeling that all this happened and nothing occurred. Well, I can tell you, right. I don't know what Lois Lerner's blood pressure is right now, but it's probably not healthy because of just what she did and the consequences for that. And everyone in that office is now dealing with the consequences of it, of decisions that they made. Now, that's not, my responsibility is not to protect people from the consequences of their bad decisions. My responsibility is to be fair and equal in the execution of whatever we do that is appropriate to represent the American people. But the hammer is coming down.
Good.
And all of this conversation about we'll never get emails. Well, that's not true. All kinds of folks said, well, you're going to request these emails from Lois Lerner. We now, a month ago, got all the emails from Lois Lerner. We continue to press the Department of Justice to turn those over. We will eventually get those. They'll stall, but if you're a dog on a bone and you just hold on tight, they don't win.
Well, and Congressman Lankford, you brought out an important point while we were discussing on the break that, we can all look at in our own justice system, if somebody commits a crime, that it has to go through proper redress, and then it might take 2 years for the evidence and the trial and all that. And the American public get that. But when it comes to Congress, they turn around and say, well, this happened last week. Why haven't you fixed it? But if you look at the timelines, and especially the environment that you're fighting against, it is kind of remarkable that we've made this much progress in just a couple of years.
Oh, sure. The justice doesn't move very quick, very slow. When you've got a conflict between the executive branch and the legislative branch, the judicial branch has to resolve that. Fast and furious, which your listeners know extremely well. Fast and furious.
Boy, that was kind of faded away.
We've done a heavy push on that one. We held Eric Holder in contempt of Congress, the first time an attorney general has ever been held in contempt of Congress in the United States, and we continue to press him for the documents that he will turn over. Now, that's in the legal system now. We've already won 2 court cases on that. He has appealed it to the 3rd. We're in the middle of the 3rd right now. We will win that one as well and continue to press on.
And then it's over after the 3rd.
Well, it's actually the 4th. It's actually there are 4 total that are sitting
total
out there, but he's trying to play the delay game at this point. It may have dropped out of the public eye. It's not dropped out of our workload.
Well, and to give you a little closure on that, the judge has issued what you'd call an interim statement that she is going to order some documents specifically to be turned over, and they will appeal that to try to delay it. We will ask that those documents still be turned over, notwithstanding that, and we'll see what happens. But here's the thing that your listeners need to understand. This administration pled in court that squabbles between the two branches should not be decided by the court. And a Obama appointee, after looking at our documents, which were all historically about Richard Nixon and Watergate, who made a similar claim that he didn't have to turn over his tapes, she ruled that they were wrong, that absolutely the justice is denied unless the court can participate in this process. But the hubris of an administration who says we're above the law, literally, has not been reported in the mainstream media. But that took us almost a year to get by to get Judge Amy Berman Jackson to rule that, of course, we had that right. And that's part of the reason that if James goes to the Senate and we take control of the Senate, we do change things, because at that point we have two bodies to hold this president accountable, and that's why I'm here in Oklahoma.
Gentlemen, we've got
great.
about 10 seconds for each one of you to make a final statement. Steve?
No, I'll waive my time to the two congressmen.
Congressman Lankford?
No, I would just say continue to be able to stand up for the freedom issues. We can do the right thing. We can do it the right way. We are Oklahomans. We do this different. This is not all about who's being the loudest. It's about being right and staying persistent.
Outstanding. Gentlemen, thanks for being here today. I hope you'll keep tabs on what we're doing over here at Warriors for Freedom for our veterans. And Colonel Russell makes it up to Washington. Take good care of him for me. He's my good friend. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us today. We'll see you again next week for another edition of Warriors for Freedom. Go to our website, warriorsforfreedom.org. Have an incredible day.